Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar episode 125. It's the 19th of January. I am Tom Francis. With me here today are...
Graham Smith.
And...
Chris Thurston.
And that's it. We are not in our usual haunt this week because of the boiler crisis of 2016, in which fully 2 of the 3 people in this room have a serious boiler problem in their house.
And it's even the same house.
Yeah. And one of those houses is our usual studio with the nice mics, and so we're in my house with the less nice mic. So apologies if that has any effect on your listening enjoyment.
We're referring to the microphone's not Mike Cook, who isn't. Who isn't in either place currently.
And his boiler might be fine, for all we know. The news this week. Maybe. Can't remember what happened in the last week. But Square Enix announced that Hitman is going... it annoys me so much that it's just called Hitman. But the next Hitman, Hitman 2016, I'm going to call it, is going properly episodic, which is a change from their previous position of somewhat episodic. And from what I gather, so the plan now, the fully episodic plan, is that the thing they launch will be, I think, $20, and it's going to be just one location. And I don't think that means just one mission. It may be that actually, maybe it's 2.
I think it's 2 locations, yeah.
Damn.
One mission. Confusing, eh?
The only thing I've said so far is false. But each location is, I think, a part of a story mission, and then also has some kind of system for creating your own hits within it and sharing those, a bit like the sort of contracts mode of Doorman Absolution. And I like this. I mean, I think the change from the sort of semi-episodic to properly episodic thing is probably them realising that previous plan might have been a PR disaster to sort of to put it in this limbo world where, like, I don't know what they were going to charge for it, but charging more than you charge for an episode, and then it's not a complete game, but it's okay because the complete game's coming, we were still working on it, we're going to give it to you in episodes, and you have to pay for the episodes, or you can get season pass, and then it just becomes that the thing that PC gamers in particular hate of, you know, the thing you buy at launch is not the full game, and then you have to keep paying to get the actual full game. But I think properly episodic is a much better model for it, and it's actually something that we specifically have said in the past that I would love Hitman to do, is just, it's the one game where I would just pay, you know, for every new piece of content that ever came out, like for Blood Money, if everything was Blood Money quality, I would pay for a new Blood Money mission every month since Blood Money came out. And they just have so much, like, if they're like Blood Money's missions, then they have so much replayability, to use a horrible word, and it's so fun to go back and just find new ways to do them and explore them in different ways, and the idea of getting a new chunk of that, it is going to be monthly once it starts up, is really appealing.
From the videos they've put out, and from the person I know who went to see it, and I think play it at a press event a few months back, they do sound like Blood Money missions, but maybe 3 or 4 times as large, with a similar or greater density of things to do and things to manipulate in the environment and people to dress up as, and different ways to kill your target. The videos they put out have been pretty convincing that they're not making Doorman Absolution, as you said, again, that they're actually making a sequel to Blood Money this time around. That's
really good. From that, it sounds like one of these locations isn't just going to be one mission from the story, right? Is there even a story?
I assume there must be a story. Yeah, but I don't know quite how that works with the...
I'm sure I heard something that actually downplaying overarching narrative a little bit in favour of maybe some sort of, like...
That would be good too.
I might be making this up, but because they're also planning on doing that live event thing, where they will insert a new mission objective into an existing environment. So there's no new assets, it's just like, there's a new target, but he's only going to show up for this week.
Yeah.
I love the idea of Hitman becoming almost like a Splunky daily challenge experience of everyone piling on, trying to do this different hit in different ways.
I think it's really smart as well, because I think Hitman is, I'm also making this up, but it'd be really interesting to see the statistics for Blood Money, like, you know, a proper Hitman game, where you saw how many people who played it, and even how many people who played it and loved it, got past the first mission, or played more than the first mission, or didn't just sort of reverse over the first mission again and again and again, trying to do it right, and so on. Because you could get a lot of game out of, to use a horrible phrase, out of just any one given mission. So it's a natural thing to divide up in that way, really. It's not just that you can extend it forever, you can also reduce it to the point where you sell somebody the Hitman starter pack, And if they don't like creatively murdering a person in that beautiful high-class location, then they don't have to invest any further to try other world locales.
Yeah.
I spent a tremendous amount of time long ago playing the Hitman 1. Hitman Codename 47, I think was his subtitle, to differentiate.
Code number, isn't it?
Yes.
Or just code.
They foresaw that they would one day reboot the series and just call it Hitman, so they made sure the name of the first game wasn't just Hitman.
If only Tomb Raider had thought to do the same. But I just played the demo over and over and over again. I can't remember if it was the first mission of the game, but you were assassinating a guy who was going to like a Chinese restaurant maybe, and he would drive in a limousine and park outside, and his driver would get out and go piss down a drain. And I just played that mission over and over again, and trying all the different formulations. And I'd never played anything like it at that point. Like all the kind of third-person or first-person games at the time were just mow down all the men's. That was pretty cool. And so I
remember. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I agree that this business model works on that front. These are totally games where you can just take a small slice and just play it over and over again.
That might be an argument against the business model, because it sort of that means
from their perspective.
Yeah, from their perspective, then that's not what they want to happen, but it's good for us.
They should totally release part of it for free. They should release the first environment and like one of however many objectives are ultimately in it for free. And then say, so you can immediately pay to unlock the rest of the objectives in the first one you get. And then,
that's the other thing I said.
Do their business plans for them. But
that's the other thing I said, is that there's, you can pay $60 and you get everything forever, kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
There's a full game option. So they're not planning to sort of milk you indefinitely, I guess. Which is a shame, because I was happy to be milked for indefinitely. Asking them to milk me.
Like a content cow just waddling up to the Hitman barn.
With my
dangling
udders full of dollars.
Yeah, udders full of dollars and a will to kill people.
Exactly. That's how I feel.
Sorry, this is such a weird image.
What have you guys been playing?
I have been playing an entertainment product called That Dragon Cancer.
I mean,
which is an interesting experience. That Dragon Cancer is a game made in memoriam of a 5-year-old child who died of cancer, made by his parents, primarily his dad.
And it was started actually while he was still alive.
He was started while he's still alive. He was diagnosed when he was 12 months old. This is Joel Green, I think his name was. Diagnosed when he was 12 months old, passed away when he was 5 of the cancer. And his parents started work on it midway through that, kickstarted it, and have now released it. It's finished. And it's an odd thing. It's about a 2-hour-long experience where you are playing vignettes from throughout Joel Green's life, including his treatment, and times when he's just playing with toys, and times in which you inhabit his dad exhausted in a hospital room trying to comfort your son who won't stop crying, and he's crying because he's thirsty, and he's thirsty because anytime he drinks anything he immediately throws it up because he's going through chemo and various other kinds of radiotherapy and so on and so on and so on. And so it's heavy subject matter, and it's beautiful to look at. Like, it was kickstarted 2-3 years ago now, and I noticed it at the time because it's presented, the world is sort of built 3D environments that are quite polygonal, where it's textured, but the textures don't have a lot of detail. So, like, characters don't have faces. They maybe have, like, a mustache and glasses, but they won't have a mouth or nose or pupils or anything like that. And the environment's in the same way. So it has this kind of, like, painterly, almost pastel colour sort of look to it. And then it's telling the story through these vignettes, which are also allegorical or metaphorical. So, a simple example of that, one that works quite well, is when years and years of treatment have gone on and you're sat down by 2 doctors to say that the prognosis is not good, that you're kind of like at the end of the road as far as the things that you can do. And you've got like a children's toy, one of those things where you can like rotate the lever to point at different farm animals and pull a string and it says something about a cow or something about a pig, and partway through the scene, this object becomes replaced with the same device, but the faces are of all the different people in the room, and as you pull the string, the camera repositions to the perspective of the mum, the dad, the doctor, the grief counsellor that's in the room at the time, and you hear a little bit of like dialogue about what they're thinking, because that's the other thing. All the dialogue is either written and recorded for the precise purpose of the game and written in a very naturalistic style, or it's taken from actual home videos that they made during the period. So you're hearing people who you can't see, or hearing people that you can't see talking, even if they're in the scene, they're not actually moving or performing the actions. You're hearing these kind of audio diaries of these experiences, which are actually real, they are not acted a lot of the time. And that gives it quite a lot of power. But so you're in this scene and you hear the different perspectives of the different people, and at a certain point the room starts to fill with water, and then at a certain point you're in a kind of rowboat trying to survive this storm in the middle of the room, and the people who are in it are now giants. You're small in this rowboat in this sea that seems vast, and the doctors in it are these massive big things like in the middle of this ocean. And so it looks great and it's quite powerful. The metaphors don't always work so well as that. And that's first of all, so I have problems with the game on multiple fronts, both of which I think stem from the fact that it is a game. One is that I feel like I've seen a lot of these kinds of stories before in other mediums, and that I find is always an obstacle to empathy. It's always an obstacle to seeing past the artifice of the experience you're having and actually feeling a connection with the humanity or the truth at the core of it. I mean, it's not hard to sympathise, of course, with parents going through what's obviously a horrible experience, and a child that's going through what's a horrible experience. But the point of these kinds of stories or art is surely to move beyond sympathy and cause you to feel some greater form of empathy, some connection to actually put you in that moment. And games have potential for that in two ways. One, that you're actually interacting with it, you're controlling it, but two, and also that it's rare for games to tackle that subject matter. So that through novelty, they might get past that feeling of, oh, I know the story beats of this. I know what the second act twist is. I know what these things would be from all the different films that you've seen, which just remind you that you're seeing something that's being constructed. Even if it's a real thing with real people, you know that it's being constructed. And the game doesn't do a very good job of that. One of which is that it's often clunky to control. So a lot of the time it's first person. Sometimes you're third person camera controlling a duck. Sometimes you're a first person camera flying around from different scenes. Sometimes you're inside a person's head. But in whatever the case, you don't use like WSD to walk around. It's obviously designed for people who don't play games. And the system they've gone for is almost like point and click. You click on a bit of floor that is like a hotspot, and that allows you to move to that point on the floor. And sometimes it's walk to that point. Sometimes the camera just smoothly transitions. Sometimes if you're a bird, you seem to like fly through the air and land on that spot. And that's how you interact with things in the environment as well. You just click on them. But it's not clear a lot of the time where those hotspots are. You can't necessarily click on any part of the floor, and the objects in the environment you're clicking on might be relatively small and there's no crosshair. And so actually positioning the center of your wide monitor over an object such that a little icon appears to let you know that you're touching it is quite fiddly. It's fiddly to move around and to control it all the time, which puts you at a remove from the experience. The second thing is that there's points at which it uses video game-like metaphors, which are just quite clumsy. The worst of them is it has like a little Mario Kart style kart racer thing in it, where you are, I think, the mum and the baby in like a cart riding around the corridors of the hospital, collecting power ups, and the power ups are the drugs that the kid is taking as part of their treatment, and the timer in the top right, that's instead of tracking your lap time, is counting up the days, weeks and months of treatment as they go by. And so it's a kind of experience designed to convey, I guess, that feeling of a great amount of time passing by, and at the end of it you get a screen that shows all the power-ups you collected, and there's like 24 different drugs with these medical names, so you get some sense, I guess, of that. And I guess there's some form of almost gallows humour to it, or maybe of the weird duality of being in a children's hospital, which is full of balloons and children's toys, and where you're playing with your kid, but also it's a place where these terrible things are happening and children are dying and so forth. But that's mostly me reaching. It doesn't convey that experience at all. You don't press any buttons to accelerate, you just move the mouse to go left and right. It's totally jarring. It's not a good kart racing game. And it's not a particularly neat or telling metaphor for like conveying something about that experience that you don't get by just someone describing it to you in a sentence. And so all of these things, I think, mean that it doesn't quite work as a game. And when I say as a game, I don't mean it wasn't fun. I mean, I feel like this was an attempt to communicate something, and it didn't do a particularly good job of communicating that thing, I don't think.
You're saying, like, it being interactive sometimes hinders it?
Yeah. And I think it's valuable for people to try to do this thing within games. I think games have tremendous potential for this stuff. But in this particular instance, when it's readings from letters they wrote during the time, and it's audio from home videos from their time, you sort of think that maybe it would have worked better if it had been a podcast or a short film or a short documentary or something like that. It would have probably been more impactful in that situation. Although I do, like I say, really like some of the level design in it. I think it's quite visually striking at times, and that does help.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a really... I found it surprising backlash on the Steam forums. It's not surprising that there is a backlash to it on the Steam forums, because... and I heard that there was one, so I went to the Steam forums to look at this, and I was expecting to see the Gone Home response of like, it's not a real game, you just walk in, you just click on stuff, and now that I know what it contains, I would have expected to see them saying the Mario Kart section is shit. But actually, it was a different kind of outrage, in that they were just completely appalled that someone would make a game about cancer. Like loads of people, some people, there were a variety of complaints, but the common one was, I just can't, what the fuck is wrong with you? Just sick to make a game about cancer. It's so gross. It sounded like a lot of them haven't played it. And one of them said something to the effect of like, I'm sure it's very like deep with its emotions and stuff, but still, you just absolutely shouldn't do this. And lots of people saying that it's sick that they're making any money from it, and all their money should go to cancer charities. And it made me realise that their kind of mindset of, this idea that games have to be things where you run around and shoot people for fun, and that they are products released by corporations for profit, are just not like value judgments that these people make. With the reaction to Gone Home, I thought people were saying like, this is a shit thing, and games, the shooty games with the gameplay, are good things, and that's why I hate this. But with the reaction to this, I realised some people just actually completely hardwired to the idea that games just fundamentally are fun and about fun. And if you make a game about cancer, you are making fun about cancer. That is, you've decided to make a fun, entertaining product for profit about cancer. And the idea that it might not be that just can't occur to them. It's just sort of not going to enter their mind.
To that extent, though, like the genre framework, even on Steam, even just within the context of Steam, that allows you to divide up what you're looking to buy, is, it's ways of subdividing the genre of games where you defeat enemies and get points, really. Like, the difference between an RPG and a shooter, or an open world game and a shooter, is in differences in implementation of similar ideas, ultimately. Whereas if you compare that to, those sorts of problems don't exist in other media. Like, if you flip through cinema listing, there's only one genre for action, and it doesn't make differentiation between different types of action. And then you have documentary or drama or romance or whatever else, where whole different approaches to tone and filmmaking are actually meaningfully separated out. Whereas, games have lots of little subgenres for what would probably be one experience in the cinema, which is person goes on an adventure and defeats enemies.
Yeah, adventure is...
Action adventure. Like, it's all action adventure, but we found, 15 ways to subdivide action adventure. And sports. Whereas, so, from that point of view, there is no category for something like that Dragon Cancer on Steam. Because it can't have first person shooter, third person shooter, adventure game, puzzle game, open world game, documentary. You know what I mean? This sort of doesn't really exist yet. It should, but it doesn't. So not to defend their perspective too much, but you can sort of see how it forms.
I wonder what its Steam tags are.
I was going to ask, because I was wondering basically whether the negative experiences you have with the vignettes you didn't like, or you found jarring, ultimately outweigh the ones that you did find impactful, and kind of what the proportion is. Because I have a pet theory now that negative experiences in interactive fiction, as in, when I say negative experiences, I don't mean I had a bad feeling, I mean frustration or feeling disconnected from the thing, linger more substantially than feeling disconnected momentarily from a documentary or a film, because of where you're passive, you just sort of zone out for a moment, you come back next time it's interesting. Whereas with the game, you have to push through the bit you don't like to get to the next bit that you like.
I agree with that, but then I also find that after the fact, the frustration of the interaction fades away, and I forget that quicker, and what I remember is just what ultimately happened in the scene. Games where I get incredibly frustrated trying to do a mission in them. For example, the first Mafia game was, I think, probably the first time I noticed that. It came out
the racing mission.
Yeah, the racing mission, or just all sorts of missions where you're just shooting people moving through barns, and it's overly difficult, and there are just waves and waves of guys, and the shooting's not that good, and the driving's kind of slow, and you just get so fucking frustrated. But I enjoyed the game, and so I completed it, and then for years afterwards was just that game was great. I love that game. It's one of my favourite games.
Until Edge is another culprit of this.
And then I would go back and play it and get an error in and be like, this is bullshit, and stop playing, because I no longer had that pool of wanting to find out what happened next or anything like that. So even with that Dragon Cancer, I'm warmer towards it now as an experience than I was when I was playing it, and I was getting frustrated and sort of bored and finding parts of it tedious and stuff like that, because now I just remember the artwork and the story and the bits of it that are nice.
I actually found that reviewing games was cathartic in that way. I'd get frustrated with the game, it would happen so often. There'd be a game where I just love so many parts of it but hate so many parts of it, and then after I'd finished writing the review and explaining why I hated the bits that I hated and why I liked the bits that I liked, it would be just sort of getting over it, and then I could just sort of enjoy it more fully, and just that thing that annoys me, I've said why that shit now, and it's on paper, it's on the record. Everyone knows what that shit, and I can just sort of ignore it a little bit and get on with it. What have you been playing, Chris?
I've been playing Dragon's Dogma, which is a segue I just really don't want to have to make. So Dragon's Dogma is a very old game that came out 3 years ago, 2012, on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, I think.
And this is Dark Arising or something.
Dark Arisen.
Dark Arisen, sorry.
So it's Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. Dark Arisen was the title of an expansion they released in 2013, I think. So it indicates the fact that it's the whole thing. It's the game plus its expansion. It's a bit like saying StarCraft Brood War, I guess. Or Game of the Year edition or something. So this is an open world RPG from Japan, and I would describe it as a kind of four-way, maybe not completely proportional merger of a JRPG, The Witcher, Divinity Original Sin, and Dark Souls. And
that sounds good.
It is really good. Really, really good, actually. I bought it on a complete whim because I've heard some people rave about it. It got a little cult following, I think, probably while people were waiting for Dark Souls 2. It was in that period where people had sort of gotten turned on to this kind of sort of Japanese take on the Western RPG again, which is ultimately what Dark Souls is. But there wasn't anything else. Those things are comparatively rare. Most Japanese RPGs are JRPGs, whereas this has some of those trappings, but it's a Western RPG made by a Japanese developer, which mostly translates to piano arpeggios, as far as I can tell. They use more substantial piano arpeggios than any Western RPG developer. But so it's funny trying to figure out what angles to approach why it's good, because it's good for a million little clever reasons rather than any kind of like standout thing. It doesn't have the sort of thematic and design purity of Dark Souls. It's not like this is a labyrinth, you go in and you just test it, but it is difficult. And it doesn't have like the plot or something like The Witcher. The overview is that the game begins with a prologue where you play as a very high level character, an abandoned adventurer is going to confront the dragon, and then the prologue either ends when you die, or when you get to the end and then a cutscene plays and then it skips out. Either way, what happens is it then goes, and then literally 1,000,000 lifetimes passed, and it's all happening again, and then you see a giant dragon born out of the sky in a cloud of harpies, and it almost crashes into the sea, but then it doesn't, and then it arrives in your quaint fishing village, which is notably lower res, and you fight it and get killed again. So a lot of the start of the game is like moments where it's sort of like fights that look like you can win, but you actually can't, because it's just wait until you fail. And then the dragon sees something in you, and then it steals your heart, but not in that way.
I'm sick of dragons seeing things in me.
It looks at you, and then it pokes you in the chest with its little claw, and then it takes your heart into the air, then its heart floats into its mouth, and then it buggers off, and then you wake up a couple of days later having been patched up with no heart anymore, but when you touch your heart, you hear the dragon's voice being like, "You're cool now.
We're even."
Yeah. See you later, protagonist. And so you're on a quest to get your heart back, but now you're now the Arisen Whiffle. And yeah, it is sort of kind of like fantasy Whiffle, but not in I don't find it offensive. Like, the game's fun enough and the story is low impact enough that I'm just sort of having fun around it, and I don't feel,
What happens then? Do you then start just doing side quests for farmers? And
stuff starts to happen in the world because you're now the Arisen, and that kind of leads you into the things. So the first thing I'd say about it, actually, to get to that point, is the combat system is fucking great. Like, it is way better than The Witcher. The movement and combat system is, I think, way better than The Witcher, in the entire series, way better than The Witcher 3. And in some ways, it's different to Dark Souls, but it's doing its own thing in a way that's really nice and actually solves some interesting problems with Dark Souls. So, it's a third-person game, third-person combat system. I'm playing with a pad, which is what I recommend. It really does feel like it's a bit like Dark Souls, that it'd be a bit clunky with a keyboard. And but unlike most games of that type, it doesn't have like either a lock-on or a dodge roll, which are the two things that are in almost every game like that. You lock on, you circle strafe, and you roll. Instead, it uses quite, and actually pretty reliable, intelligent targeting to kind of know roughly what you want to do, and you press the stick, and then you have like a light attack and a heavy attack, and then you can modify, by holding either of the shoulder buttons, you modify attacks for either your primary weapon or your secondary weapon, which is like with daggers and a bow, or a sword and a shield, and if you're a wizard, it's wizard things that are different. My experience is of melee combat, so I'll talk about that. First thing is it feels really, really impactful. Second thing, and this becomes important for a different reason, every enemy type is sort of meaningfully different, attacks you in different ways, and it's very physical. Like, grapples are a big thing. Grabbing people, being knocked to the ground is a big deal.
I saw a man hanging from an ogre's butt.
I'll get there. Yeah. Grappling is a big deal. Grabbing things, and different enemies being strong or weak against different elements and different types of attacks. Some enemies really don't like being knocked over. Some enemies no one likes it, but some enemies are really resistant to being knocked over, but can be stunned if you block when they attack and that kind of thing. So you learn those patterns. This is traditional good combat design stuff. The animation's really nice, feels very impactful, and it's nice in a kind of low fantasy way. Like, there's not a lot of, it's obviously like, sword techniques and things, but it doesn't fall into like the Dragon Age Inquisition problem of even swords are magic, where you are teleporting and doing like whirlwind strikes and stuff. Like, it feels quite weighty, which I really like. I mean, I know I'm a bit of a sword fighting nerd anyway, but like, it feels like fighting with a sword and shield is no way realistic, but it feels like an interchange of blows and parries and moving back and forth, rather than I use this ability, then I use that ability. Like, and the way they design sword skills is actually super interesting for that reason, where I have a whole bunch of them now, which are my modified sword attacks. One of them is a dash and a lunge, which does act in a kind of gamey way to be like a distance closer. But in another game, that would be a teleport strike. And it's actually called Blink Strike, and Blink is normally a teleport in a game, but this is actually like, you do run. You run really quickly, but it's physical. But other things are like, it's like a disengagement strike, which is something that Dark Souls doesn't have, but is interesting strategically, where you swipe while jumping backwards, which, in terms of the geometry of those encounters in a third-person action game, isn't something you see very often. because everything's always usually about forward and then roll backwards and then forwards again, then roll backwards. And little subtle changes like that change the rhythm of the game completely. And hits are genuinely are based on, not hit scan, but you know what I mean, actually hitting things in 3D space with the attack you've chosen to use. So that's really cool. The standout thing is grabbing. If you grab a small creature, then you will, grab it and force it to the ground, or your allies can hit it and so on. If you grab a big creature, such as an ogre, you then freeform climb it. It's not like a QTE where you press the, like any of like God of War or something. You go to the big enemy, you start the damage sequence button, and then you press the buttons in the right order to do the animation where you climb the creature. You are actually physically climbing them.
It's more like Groham.
Possibly, I haven't played Groham, but like it's not. But nor is it like node based, so that there's like a climbing route up the creature or anything. It's completely freeform. Like you are on them, and you can move in completely 3D space. And the thing that mitigates it is you have a stamina bar, which is normally like special attacks and stuff, and that drains constantly while you're on something.
This counts as special.
Yeah, what I'm doing is special. You scream. And that then leads into, early on you have to fight a Cyclops, and that involves climbing to its head and hitting it in the eye, as you'd expect. And it creates these kind of cool, like, Jason and the Argonauts moments where the way you kill something isn't ultimately just about hitting it enough, which is a factor, but it's like, so a lot of creatures are just completely invulnerable unless you do something specific to them. And then there are creatures that can fly and kind of taking you with them, and you can die if you fall off. Like, and, your archers on the ground to drag ground, and we'll talk about allies in a bit, that's the other part of it. But it's, and, so like that first bit where you fight the dragon on the beach and you're supposed to lose, I didn't realize I was supposed to lose, so I dodged it for a bit, then I went up its leg, and I was like riding around on its back trying to hit it, and it's completely invulnerable to you at that point in the game. And then I fell off, and then it hit me, and that's when it triggered the next part of the cutscene. But the whole thing felt like a cutscene that I'd orchestrated. Like, they could have done that as a cutscene where the would-be savior of the village tries to climb the dragon, but fails. And that's the cutscene, but instead, that's what I did, and that was that was only enabled through the combat system. And, yeah, it does that. It gives you a degree of freedom with how you approach a fight in that regard that no other game I can think of does. Like, there's a moment, this isn't really a spoiler, but I guess it's like the end of the tutorial kind of thing, where you have to fight a really big Hydra. And the Hydra, it's massive, it's like, 7 giant snakes attached to a central snake. Snake Central. I don't know. A bigger snake, basically.
Hub snake,
yeah.
One of the weird Metal Gear
it's my really disruptive startup.
All that.
So while fighting it, I was like, well, I'm getting up on them heads. Like, that's where I'm going. So and I fell off. And then it triggered the next part of the boss fight, because this is happening in like a fort. And it dynamically destroys parts of the environment. Well, not dynamically, but like as part of the fight. And then it just moves, and it goes to like, this entire giant thing wraps itself around what was previously like a watchtower in the center of the fortress, where some NPCs had actually seemed to have dynamically run, because there was loads of NPCs around when I did this. And then it like crushes the fortress with its coils, and the whole thing collapses, which is really rad to look at, and happens just in the world where you're fighting it. But it didn't just happen while I was fighting it, it happened while I was clinging onto it. And so I had this thing where I was being pulled along with it, because obviously it's like, and I keep seeing it from a game design point of view, it's doing a canned animation, right? Like, it's doing something it's been programmed to do, which is get to this point in your health bar, and then slither over here, do this animation that's only going to play once in the game, where you go around this watchtower, and then destroy it. But it's letting me freeform climb this thing as it's doing its kind of completely custom cutscene style animation, and that's a level of robustness in terms of respecting what you want to do that games don't tend to do. And they also,
cool.
Like Dark Souls doesn't do that with its big enemies. Dark Souls' big enemies are about, you wait till they put their foot on the ground, and then you hit their foot for a bit, and then they go, oh, my foot, I must put my face on the floor for a while.
That's how it works.
Yes, I feel bad. Oh, I have it sleep. Oh, he's hitting my face. Back to feet. I've died. And so on. So being able to take the fight directly to the face is really welcome. So that's maybe a slightly overlong explanation why the combat system is great, but it builds into the other thing that's great about the game, and the thing that happens, I guess, that spurs you on your adventure, is that you have 3 companions that are they're not like pre-written characters, but they do talk a fuckload. So you have these characters called pawns, as in chess pawns. Although I'm going to have to say the word pawn a lot for the next how long, so bear with me. So they look exactly like people, and they talk, and they have opinions on stuff a lot, but they're not humans. They are like trans-dimensional mercenaries that are like homunculi. Like, they're not human, they don't have real feelings, but I don't know what the fuck they are. But the first time you walk into your village and there's this thing called like a rift stone, and you walk past it, and just a fucking wizard drops out of the sky. Because the stone wakes up because you're the Arisen. And your ability is, you can command the pawns, the Pawn Legion, .com, which, and you meet just a wizard who just sort of drops out of the town. He's like, hello. And then he takes you to this fortress, and then you get the ability to create your own pawn. And your pawn is your second character. And that's the only pawn that you will keep forever. So you create the second character, and you go through the entire character creation process again, but at the end of it you do like a personality quiz. And that dictates a few things about their inclination, which affects what classes they'll be good at. And you customize everything from their look to their voice. I think there are like 3 voice actors and then 3 different pitch shifted versions of each of those voice actors. So it's like 9 voices total for each gender. And you name them and give them a nickname and everything else. And then that person will follow you around forever and level up with you, and you can give them gear and whatever and treat it like a second character. But then you also recruit 2 other pawns that you will just pick from people wandering the world. And that you'll see them on the roads, you'll see them in towns, you'll see them in fortresses or whatever, or gathered, or you can go directly into the rift and search for specific ones, like I want a level 9 warrior. And they don't level up, ever. You have to get new ones when you level up. So you use the same ones for a while, then you overlevel, and you get some more. But they are made by other players. They are other players' pawns. When you are not playing, your pawn is off having adventures with other people. and this ends up being really, really cool, because for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I think it's the heart of why this game is ultimately really different. While you're walking around, the pawns talk constantly. They have loads of bespoke dialogue recorded for environments, quests, and monsters. So they'll say things like, those flowers you need, I think they grow by the beach, or whatever. But they'll only say that if they know that. And they only know that if they've done that quest. So when you've done that quest, your pawn then knows that. And if that pawn goes off on an adventure with a different player, they'll say, they'll say last time I did this, but it'll be like, I think we need to go further into the forest, master, or something. They also comment on, I think, and Thompson does a better impression of this than me, completely innocuous shit in the environment constantly. Like, 'tis a fine fort for repelling goblins, they'll say every single time you go to a fort. Or like, a staircase necessary for going up. and they'll all say different times, they'll talk to each other and whatever. And they'll help you in combat, like, climb on its head, or whatever. And they'll climb things themselves, like, they'll do freeform climbing.
Remember to reload, Freeman!
Yeah. But actually it works, it ends up feeling, some people apparently hate this about the game, and switch off the dialogue, but I really like it, because it feels way more specific to the situation than the barks in, like, Mass Effect or Dragon Age do, where it's like, God, better shoot them!
Switching to shotgun.
Yeah, or whatever. Because it's always specific, like, and you hear the
More
same
like
lines.
Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, actually. Like, it has that thing of, like, it doesn't take much to humanize the characters that are running around with you. And because the players, they're made by other people, and they usually look unusual. And you'll hear them go, like, wolves hate fire! And then, like, cast a fireball or something. And that person's immediately got a personality. And so on. And actually, there are the personality affects how they respond to the situations as well. Because when you go to an inn, which is where you rest and set skills and stuff, you can sit in the knowledge chair. And the knowledge chair is something that should be in every pub in the country. You sit in the knowledge chair, and then it cuts to a cutscene where you're sat opposite your pawn, and you have like a heart-to-heart about something, and your pawn will ask you 3 questions, and it appears to be random, and this is an opportunity to shift 3 things about their personality. First thing is inclination, which is actually their AI. So I had a problem, my mage wouldn't stop climbing things. Like, she's a wizard, but she wouldn't stop fucking climbing enemies.
I'll fuck you up! I got a shiver, mate!
And it's like, I need her to be at the back, casting fireballs and lightning and stuff.
Wizards fling from the back.
Wizards do fling from the back. And so we had this conversation, and this is because she had 2 personality traits that were competing with each other. One was Scather, and the other was Challenger. And they're kind of similar in that they're both aggressive, but Scather is the one that makes them want to get up close and personal. So we sit down, the first thing she says is like, would you prefer me to attack close up, or focus on ranged enemies. And I go, ranged enemies, please. She goes, that's okay. Okay, yeah. And then
I thought I could tell the last time I was there.
you need the knowledge.
I saw your look.
I want knowledge chair for housemates. You go to the pub and you sit in the knowledge chair and you go like, we need to talk about the fridge or something. Like, but yeah, and then the next question is like, and then the last time I played it, the last question was, Master, you may dictate me completely.
Oh my God.
What shall I say if I am hit by a deadly blow?
Okay.
And the options were like aggressive, timid, cautious, and ordinary. So I chose ordinary. Be yourself.
Ordinary death.
Just whatever comes naturally to you at the moment you're killed.
I die as a normal person would.
Dying.
At the end of my life.
But it allows all this stuff to build up cumulatively, rather than allowing you have a lot of freedom over how they look, but each individual player who's playing it is making one of these characters and steering all of these decisions that are made by sort of degrees. And so cumulatively, even though there's a limited number of classes in the game, they do end up quite unique. Like, I remember the mage I was travelling around with for a while, who whenever I resurrected him, if he fell, would go, God, how embarrassing! As he stood up or something. And that sort of sticks with you, you know what I mean? So we end up with this kind of like thing. And also when you're with someone else's character and they know something about the monster you're fighting, you haven't fought it before. A, it's useful. And B, it fills in the personality of the world a little bit. So that's awesome. And yeah, basically it's this sort of, it is a little bit disconnecting being sort of in a sea of other people's characters kind of wandering the world. But there's something very kind of compelling about having that kind of multiplayer presence always there. But ultimately it's your own thing as well. And then when you you have to dismiss these people eventually because you'll out-level them. You can choose to send them back with a gift and a review. So you can review them out of 5 in 3 categories.
Like Airbnb.
Do they see them?
Yeah. So you can choose not to do this, but you can send a gift. So you can't affect the equipment of pawns that aren't your own. But if you give them an item, that's just treated as like a gift to their proper owner. So I give them all fish. I give them all small fish. I send them back with a small fish. Which is probably bad manners or something, but and then you can review them on it's like appearance, combat, and helpfulness, which are the 3 criteria by which people should be judged as far as I'm aware.
How they die as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can create a custom message out of preset phrases, like excellent in combat, or excellent all around, or I didn't like his face. It's really great.
Can these people die permanently?
If they die and you don't resurrect them in the fight, or after, I think they can get put into a down state where you have to go and revive them. And then if you leave them like that for too long, they get pulled back into the rift, and then I think you have to find a new one.
If it's not yours, you wouldn't be
no, I
using
don't.
it for
I've never lost
right?
mine, so I don't know what happens if you lose mine. You haven't used it forever because it's definitely essential to the game.
Right.
But you see them wandering the road as well. You'll be wandering around, you'll see one getting just someone else's character getting attacked by wolves in the distance, and you can just recruit them on the road if you want to.
What happens if you're using someone else's pawn and then they start playing the game?
I think it's maybe I'm wrong about it being when you're offline. I think it is just duplicates of the same character, and it doesn't make a difference as long as somebody's using your character really. The other thing that I haven't done, because I think it would probably break the game a little bit, but it'd be interesting to try, is so you can use pawns of your own level or less for free, but there's a currency that you can use to hire pawns at a higher level than you are, and they are just better, so you can do higher level content or something, because it does get quite hard. But you can use your friend, anyone who's on your friends list on Steam, you can use their pawns for free at any time. So if you have a massively high level friend, you can bring their characters into the game whenever you want. And I did this briefly with Tom Senior's character, because he was much higher level than me at the time. But I stopped for 2 reasons. One, because I didn't want to kind of make the game trivially easy for me by wandering around with this NPC that would do everything for me. But also because he's picked the most distracting voice. And I talked about it to him in the office. I'll probably talk about this next week. But
you sit him in the knowledge chair and say, we need to talk about the voice thing.
You can't sit other people's pawns in the knowledge chair. You can only sit your own pawn in the knowledge chair. It's like child
I meant, did you
ownership.
sit Tom Senior in the knowledge chair?
Oh, something. Yeah, I might do at work. Yeah, because he's picked the deepest male voice possible and a big fat knight, and it's almost inaudible. But it is, you just walk around and you'll hear like, like what the f was that? And it also makes it a lot of useful during combat because he knows things, but I can't fucking understand a word he's saying. So they sent him away, dismissed him back into the rift.
What's your motivation most for playing it? Is that, do you care about the plot? Are you enjoying leveling up your stats? Is it just that the combat's so much fun?
It's a mixture of all those things. Like, actually, plot's probably the least important. And there's like, the writing isn't great. Well, it's not good. It's probably bad even, but it's fine. Like, but it's in this sort of fake Shakespearean English, like, that isn't right.
It's never good.
But I quite like it.
Fair? Renaissance?
Yeah, a bit Renaissance fair. Like, and I quite like it, but that's because I have some terrible taste in some cases. So, like, I'm not going to claim that that's good. I think it is fun to progress. There's lots of interesting progression systems. The leveling up is really generous with how easy it is to change class and stuff and experiment with different things. And all that stuff is meaningful because the combat system's so good. And I think it's more of a kind of, and I want to explore and see what's, like, because you're given a lot of freedom to just sort of wander off and do whatever you want. Like, there's a main plot, but you're mostly gated by how hard things are and where you can and can't fight your way to. So there's just a kind of basic pleasure in getting places and finding stuff. And that is compounded by the combat being good, but it's also compounded by it being fun to see what the pawns you've got with you know. And like, when you go somewhere and like, if they know that there's like going to be a bandit attack on a given road, they say like, we should be careful about bandits, master, for reasons. And then like 20 seconds later, your bandits come jumping out of the bushes and you go, cool. And so that, I don't know, I find it very easy to sink loads of time into just because it's sort of consistently enjoyable. It's definitely consistently enjoyable in a way that the Dark Souls isn't. I think Dark Souls is the better game in every sense, and obviously I think one of the best games ever made, but it's a trial. And it's good because it's a trial. Whereas this is hard, but it doesn't feel like, it's not like punishing in the same way. Like, if you die, you just go back to a save. So it's not like you're losing loads of resources when you die. If you go try and do a quest and it's too high level for you, you just go do something else. Or just go do whatever and fight and get new stuff and craft better equipment and wear a new hat. Put a monocle on your follower that makes them cleverer or something.
More Skyrim-y, maybe.
Yeah, more witchery, I suppose. Or the Witcher has the story thing going for it and presentation. It's not a brilliant looking game because it is a 3-year-old last generation console game. It's been souped up and it runs very well, but it still looks like a JRPG from 3 years ago. But yeah, I really like it.
They are making a sequel as well, aren't they?
Are they?
I thought they were. I thought they announced it.
I thought they'd announced an MMO. Which I think would be a shame. But I don't know. Maybe they have. If they have, that's great, because I think it deserves to be a thing, because it's really fun.
What have you been playing, Tom?
I've been playing 2 games that are both about people who are cut off from society using radios and solving mysteries. The first of which is Firewatch, which is a forthcoming game from Camposanto, who are composed of the Idle Thumbs guys, and which includes Sean Bannerman and Jake Rodkin, who worked heavily on the Walking Dead series, and Ollie Moss, brilliant artist, and Nils Anderson, who is lead on Mark of the Ninja. So a very cool group of people. And the other one is Oxenfree, which I'll get to next. I'm not going to say too much about Firewatch because it's so story-based and it's a mystery, and so talking about the story would be counterproductive, so I don't want to spoil anything. But I will say the thing I wanted to know before I played it, that I couldn't really extract from any of the promotional stuff. I kind of stopped watching videos of it at a certain point because I didn't want to be too spoiled on the dialogue or anything. But I couldn't tell what kind of game is it. What do you do? Like, moment to moment, what is it about doing? Because I heard someone say something about puzzle solving, and I thought, oh, so it's a puzzle game. But it's not at all. And also, kind of, I think from looking at it, I thought it was going to be some kind of journey. So it's called Firewatch because you are a lookout in a tower in a forest who is employed to watch out for fires. You literally watch for fires. And in much of the game, you actually watch a fire. And it's not a journey or puzzle-based. You are very kind of just in one location, really. Like, there's a tower that you're based at, and the structure of the game kind of is in little sorties away from that and then coming back to it. And so it's really just one area. And you could call it open world. You can pretty much go anywhere at any time-ish. There are a few bits that are kind of gated off until you have certain bits of equipment. But it's all kind of one area. And that could get repetitive to kind of keep trekking back and forth, because it's very much, kind of takes, it's not the kind of game that would ever have fast travel, because it's about walking through the forest, and it's about, digging a rope into a rock and climbing down a rocky slope. And you're a very kind of uncool guy in dorky shorts who's a little bit overweight, and you need a rope to go down a sort of gentle slope of rocks that really any human could jump down. But the reason that traversing that world is, it's quite just sort of pleasurable anyway. You can run quite fast, and the bits where you do have to sort of clamber up stuff is all really well animated. You see your limbs clambering over things. But also, and that is animation by James Benson, who I think we might have talked about before, who did the amazing TF2 dance videos and the Half-Life first-person video.
Yeah.
And so that's like moving around is inherently pleasurable. And then also, even though you're in the same place the whole time, the actual kind of structure of the game, what you do is it's very, very story-driven. But ultimately, if you want to reduce it to game terms, what you're doing is just get to place A. Like, for story reasons, you need to get to place A to do X. But X is never solve a puzzle or fight an enemy or anything like that. It's always just kind of see the next bit of the story. But those journeys take place over different days. You kind of progress through time, and each kind of new day has its own mood and atmosphere and lighting, and so the whole place just completely changes colour. It'll go from being sort of a nice, pleasant orange sunset to the next day being a brilliant green and shafts of sunlight and dazzling, to a like cold grey misty morning, to really blazing orange when things are on fire and there's smoke. And it does a really good job of having each time have its own atmosphere rather than each place have its own atmosphere. They do within the environment. Obviously there are different places with their own feel to them as well, but that kind of solves the problem of it all being in one area. And I think that's probably all I'll say about it, except that it's gorgeous and it's an intriguing mystery. I don't want to say anything about what the mystery is, but you should play it when it comes out next month.
They did a preview event last year, which I did not go to, but it sounded cool. Obviously it feels like a post Gone Home kind of game, and the post part of that is that your interactions don't seem quite so binary, in that there are situations where there are maybe 8 different things you can do with the same object and the same characters. And there's maybe not, characters that you're having direct conversations with, or other than the one over the radio. But even there, like over the radio, you've got a dialogue tree. You can choose from 2 different options, or you can choose to say nothing. And I don't think this is a spoiler, because it's been in the trailers and it's been in the preview build, and it's really early in the game, I think, like first 20 minutes, but there are 2 teenagers in a lake having a party, and you can choose how you deal with that. You can just go down there and you can yell at them, you can go down there and you can ask them politely to stop, you can go down there and you can turn off their radio, you can go down there and you can take their radio, you can go down there and you can pick up the radio and throw it in the river, and all of these things will then have different responses, both in terms of your conversation over the radio and the things that the other characters say and that sort of stuff. Like, it feels playful in that way, which
so
seems
that
exciting.
bit is in there. Maybe I missed them, but I didn't have a lot of other times when I felt like I had a lot of different options for how to deal with something. It was a lot of kind of like, you can't get through this door, so you've got to do something about the padlock, and maybe there are multiple solutions to the padlock, but I only found the one. But the dialogue thing is definitely true. You always there's masses of dialogue. You can talk to, there's only really the one other person you talk to, but she will message you, and you'll get the option to reply, and you have choice of replies, and those take you down different paths, or you can ignore her entirely, and she'll sometimes get annoyed at you for that. But also, as you're walking around the world, you can look at almost anything and bring up your radio and tell her about it. And it has the absurd, like, that system is just called reporting. And so, you find a broken communication line, you have the option report broken communication line. but also for anything you want to talk about. For some reason, it's always called reporting. So it'll just say report meadow. For what? What's it done? Report tree. Report brook. And it's really, that is an interesting system because it's not, in some cases it's sort of on a critical path and you find something dramatic and you have to report that in. But then most of it is optional, and also most of it is just not that report worthy. Like a lot of the times you're telling her about something where there's no real reason to tell her about that. And sometimes because you're quite friendly, she will go along with it. If you say, it's a beautiful view out here or something, and then she'll say, yeah, I love this area. But then other times she'll just say, oh, all right. Like, there's a whole series of them I did where she just said nothing. Just like, and it felt totally natural. It was what you would say in response to what I just said, because I was just commenting on something completely banal that she said she wasn't interested in.
I think being a slightly overweight, uncool man wandering around the wilderness reporting everything is going to resonate particularly strongly with Dota players because of the particular context of the word report in that game, where report person is the thing you spam when someone's playing badly. Like, report this fucking meadow. Report brook.
No, you stub your toe on something.
Report tree.
But the interactive conversations, the one where you choose a dialogue option in response to what she's saying, have lots and lots of very small ramifications. They'll just be reflected in tiny things later, like a bit of text or a drawing or something like that. To the point where I almost think, I suspect they've done way more than I really appreciated, because they're so subtle that often I'd look at a sheet and think, that might be a response to my choice, but probably not. If I was making this, I'd just make it generic, but vague enough that you couldn't really tell. But yeah, there's loads of that stuff in it. But it's not like a kind of, I don't know, maybe I was going to say it's not like a branching narrative. Maybe it does branch in ways that I didn't. I only played it through once, so I can't really speak to that. But it feels like it has a very particular critical path that you go through. The other game is Oxenfree, which is Firewatch is first person. Oxenfree is third person and very zoomed out, and you play a girl called Alex who's going on a boat to a remote island for a sort of beach party with her friends. They're all teenagers, and you go into a cave and weird stuff starts happening. And all the weird stuff is triggered by your radio. So both games are entirely about radios for some reason. And it's a absolutely gorgeous, kind of hand-painted, pastel-y look to it. A very, stylized environments. And then your characters are kind of 3D polygonal models, but also very kind of broad strokes. You don't really have facial features, I don't think. And it's zoomed out enough that you can't really tell. The most immediately striking thing about it is it starts with this kid Ren, and I've just come from Firewatch, which has very naturalistic voice acting. It's two people who are kind of just acting like mature adults in a often a lot of the situations you're in are just mundane, like dramatic things happen and then you kind of calm down and then you're just talking about general stuff, and so it's very naturalistic tone. And then the first voice you hear in Oxenfree is your friend Ren, who just talks all the time and is really kind of enthusiastic and kind of hyper. And at first, the first few words, I didn't like it because I was just coming from a naturalistic thing, and this is more of an acting thing. But actually, the more you listen to him, the more kind of likable he becomes. And he's a little bit nerdy, but he's not like a nerd stereotype. He's just a sort of weirdly over-talkative person who just has opinions and thoughts about everything. And the amazing thing about it is he just whitters on and on and on. And you can walk around while he's doing that. And he might comment if you kind of walk into a different room to him. But he'll carry on talking to you. And your stepbrother Jonas is there, and he'll carry on talking to him. But also, all the things you can look at in the world, you just wander around and just kind of press use on them to look at them. But rather than being a kind of introspective thing where she says something to herself about, it looks like a door, she says something to the others about it. And that'll interrupt what the guy is saying. And he'll have a reply for you. Like, you'll say, look at this. Your character's kind of... I might be reading too much into this, but she seems like a bit of a history buff. She sort of loves... Because I keep using everything and interacting with it. And most of the things you're interacting with are there's a kind of museum on the island, or sort of interactive exhibits throughout the whole thing. So it's just old statues and commemorative plaques and things. So I keep using those, and she keeps talking about them. So because she's not talking to herself, she talks to her friends. She comes across as a massive history nerd. Because she keeps saying, "Hey, I think this wheel was owned by this famous captain. I think he did this and this and this." And then she sort of like mocks herself for knowing that. And but yeah, that will interrupt the conversation that the guy is having. He'll stop right away. Sometimes stop right away. Sometimes finish his sentence before you interrupt to talk about this thing. Then he'll reply to you about that thing, and there can be dialogue options about that, and you have a whole conversation, and then when that finishes, he goes back to exactly where he left off, and says, anyway, so I was saying about the car, and then as soon as he goes back into it, and then you can, like, while he's talking, just go off and talk to someone else, and that conversation interrupts it. You can, like, there's just so many layers of conversations that can all interact with each other, or not interact with each other, but, like, just interrupt each other, and then it keeps kind of cascading back. I'd love to see the sort of like flow chart diagram for how this is working behind the scenes, like a visualization of all these conversation threads going on, because it's exactly the kind of thing I would say, no, you just can't do that. It would just be a fucking nightmare to sort out who's talking.
That sounds great, but what genre of action adventure is this? What do you...
This is actually a horror.
Okay.
Once the mystery stuff kicks off, it's sort of... I mean, I've heard people say that they found it scary to play. If I hadn't heard that, I would have said it's not a scary horror because you're so kind of removed from it. You're very pulled out. Your character's on screen, and it isn't really the stuff you're encountering is so far. At least I haven't completed it. Is kind of creepy things happening, but as far as I've seen, my character's never been in direct danger. I've never been like a thing rushing towards me or grabbing me or anything. It's just like, oh, look at that weird thing happening over there. And the mystery stuff is quite good. It's intriguing. It's very themed around your radio and sort of static and stuff like that. Obviously, I don't want to say anything about what it is, but it's unusual. Like I haven't seen anything exactly like that before, and it's just started to get to the point where it uses loads of cliches. I suppose I shouldn't say anything about it. But it uses a bunch of cliche mystery things, and not in a kind of way of it looks like X, but it could be Y. Like,
it's X.
Yeah. It's trope X. And it's also trope Y. But I've forgotten what I was going to say about that. I feel like I was going to justify it in some way, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, so after that, it kind of uses those, starts with those and then builds on them. And they combine in interesting ways. And one of the things is sometimes when you see a reflection, there'll be something different about it. And that stuff has just started getting really interesting. To the point where he's seeing glimpses of interesting things, and then I saw just one tiny detail of my reflection that was different in a weird way that I didn't quite understand at first. And then the second time I saw it a bit clearer, the next time there's a weird reflection thing. And I still don't know if it's doing what I think it's doing, but if it is, it's super interesting. I tried Googling a word I saw to find out if it related to something else in the real world to see if that could be an explanation for what's happening. But yeah, I can't really go into any more detail than that. But the writing's really good. It's sometimes very funny. It's very team cast. Right? You are a blue-haired girl who's kind of a little bit withdrawn, who has this close trusted friend in Ren, who's the talkative guy. And your new brother-in-law, I think, is probably meant to be a romantic interest, but I hate him because he's wearing a beanie over like long hair in a way that looks really posery. And you don't see this in the game, but every now and then someone takes a photo, and it does this really nice like touch where someone takes a photo, you don't see it, and then you carry on playing the game because it's still zoomed out, you can't really see anyone's faces or anything, and then on the next loading screen they'll just show what that last photo was that was taken, and you'll see everyone's faces grinning, and it was just on like a comic book drawing in a totally different art style. But it's really cool because I remember like when the photo's taken, I think, Alex is standing there. I wonder if that will be reflected in the photo, and it is. And that, yeah, after I actually saw his face in the photo, I'm like, okay, I definitely don't want any kind of romance with that guy. Staying well away from him. He seems like trouble. And so there's lots of lines where he kind of invites you to become more sort of close with him, and I just keep shoving him down brutally. But there's stuff like, you go into a cave and a weird thing happens, and you go deeper into a cave, and it got to the point where, like, I just walked all the way into the cave to follow someone else in there, and weird thing happened. And then I had already sort of, decided to follow them that far. And then when second weird thing happened, during the dialogue, you get to say, like, oh yeah, this is interesting, let's chase it up. Or, no man, I think this is scary. And then I just said, like, I think we should go or something. Was the dialogue option I chose. And then the actual line she said was something like, Yeah, I think at this point, if we don't leave, we're just idiots. And you get to just walk out.
I played a game recently which was also about teenagers at a party. It's called Little Party, but you don't play one of the teenagers. You play the mum of the teenage girl that's throwing the party. And she's throwing an art party. So she's going to make music, and she's invited around 3 or 4 of her creative teenage friends, one of whom is a painter, one of whom is going to try and make a short film, one of whom's designing a board game. And as the mum, it's kind of, it's really close in, third person, like Dead Space over the shoulder.
Little Party, Dead Space.
but you're a mum, and you walk around the house interacting with objects and interacting with characters. But it's done in a kind of painterly style, so the characters are 2D sprites, like cartoon drawings kind of thing, whereas the rest of the world is 3D models made in Unity, but the textures on the rest of the world are done in the same kind of loose coloured sort of Photoshop, can see the lines sort of style. And it's really beautiful at certain points, because you can explore the house and the area around the house, which has like a meadow and a river, and it's sort of Firewatchy. Firewatchy in that sense. And it's just little vignettes that get triggered as you after you've talked to all the characters and interacted with all the objects. There will be like a prompt to go do a particular thing that will move time forward, and you kind of live the experience of throwing this party for you. No, you're not really throwing it. You're trying to be helpful, but you're not really involved in any way. And because you're a gamer and you're expecting that there is going to be some sort of drama involving the teenagers, and you instinctively feel protective of your teenage daughter. But it goes to some surprising places, and it's really stylistically nice. Like, one of the things is that any object that can be interacted with puts huge, thick, bold text over the screen. So the first thing you do is you make guacamole for your daughter and her friends for the party. And so just when you see the ingredients in the kitchen and you look at it, it comes up with "make guac" in huge letters on the screen. And so you do that. And then you politely point out that there's guacamole in the kitchen if anyone wants it later on, once the friends arrive and stuff like that. But it's really nice, and it's pay what you want. It's made by Turnfollow, who've made only this and one other game, as far as I know. It seemed to be like a small indie team of like 2 people or something like that. And it's great.
I hadn't heard of the developer of Oxenfree, and I also can't remember them now. It's just an interesting thing to come out of nowhere, because it's so sort of professional, like it's so accomplished. It's not just a good story with good act, like all the voice acting is really good, the writing's good, and it also, just like I say, the conversation system from a technical perspective is really advanced.
Brilliant month for dynamic not shutting the fuck up.
Yes. Oh, actually, I played another tiny thing. I should mention Reap, which is a reap as in the reaper, but also reaping crops, because that's actually what it's about. It's not about the reaper. It's a sort of very low colour palette, top-down survival game with a random generated map where you have been shipwrecked on an island, and you wake up surrounded by turnips and spades. And you were on an expedition to find some treasure, but your treasure map was torn, would you believe it, into 5 different pieces that are now strewn across the randomly generated world. And all you've got with you is, near the sort of site of your crash, there'll be a spade, a scythe, some turnips, an axe, and a map that's just of the whole island. And
That's convenient.
The one you've lost, it happens to be the exact island you crashed on. The one you've lost is of the actual location of the treasure, and you have to use your map of the island, which doesn't say where you are, to find your way to all of the fragments. The map, for some reason, does have the fragments on it. It's not clear why it would know that.
So thank God you brought a map to where your map fragments would eventually be lost.
Yes.
It would have been embarrassing if that was the map you'd lost.
Let's say when the ship was in trouble, I'm writing my own backstory for this game, there's a big storm, and I don't know how your map got torn into 5 pieces, but
They gave 5 pieces of the map to 3 different trained seagulls.
you dropped your scythe, and it bounced off the mast and sliced your map into 5 pieces, and it got blown in the wind. But while it was blowing in the wind, you came to this island because, like this series of islands, you know where the treasure's somewhere here. So you bought a map for that. But the treasure map, which was pretty vital to your plan, was severed into 5 different pieces and scattered to the winds. But this is before your ship crashed, so you got to see where each one landed, and while it landed, made a note on your map, okay, that one landed there, that one landed there, that one landed there. But then your ship got shipwrecked, you lost consciousness, so you don't know where you are. Because that's like a key part of it, is you're not on the map, you don't know where you are at all. And my favourite thing about it, actually, was just looking at the map and thinking, okay, so let's put this away, walk around and see what I can find out about my current location. There's a forest in the north, and it's kind of this shape, and then there's a coast right next to that. And if I go all the way over to the coast, I can see the tip of another island. But also, while you're doing this, you're constantly passing out because everything you do uses up energy. And when you run out of energy, there's no decision to sleep. You just, as soon as you run out of energy, you just collapse on the spot, and that accelerates time. And time both kind of uses up your food, and if you run out of that, you die. And also, there's a day-night cycle, and that just expands your field of vision, and that's done in a really beautiful way where there's just this kind of circle around you. It's very pixely. There's a circle around you, and outside of that circle it's just completely blank, and inside of the circle you can see everything. And during the day that's very big, and during the night it's tiny. And so during the night you have no hope of finding out where you are, so you have to wait till the day and then walk around with your big vision circle and try and read as much of the scenery as possible, then refer back to your map and see, I think I'm on this island. And then from there, okay, how do I get to the next map fragment? And then you've got to go and chop some wood and build a raft. Make sure you take enough turnips with you on your journey so that you don't die of hunger. And you can also farm turnips by sort of spading the ground and putting turnips in there and then waiting for a very, very long time. So you end up making a kind of home-based farm where you plant all the turnips that you can, but then you need a couple to kind of eat to stay alive for now, and then go off on expeditions from your base and then return back with each map fragment and try and assemble it. And it's just a beautiful little kind of way of capturing that treasure / survival feeling. The fact that you actually have to read the map is really, really cool. And by recognizing features, and then once you do find the treasure map, it's like a picture of the location of the treasure as if you're there. So it's not a map to where that location is, it's just a picture of that location. And then you have to try and reference that to the big map and see, can I see any bit of land that looks like that little picture? And it's, the difference in scale is enormous, so it's very difficult to spot. And because it's randomly generated, I imagine it's possible to get a bit of terrain that's just really nondescript.
I played this through for one life, which took me about 10 minutes, which was as far as eating a bunch of turnips, planting some turnips, digging up some trees, finding the first map, building a little raft, realising as I sailed away towards another island that I was about to starve to death, turning around, sailing back towards where I planted the turnips, and then just kind of waiting there, waiting for
in time for dinner.
Grow, and it passed out a couple of twice. And just as one of the turnips just kind of popped out at the surface, I don't know if they pop out completely before you pick them up.
No.
If they just pop up part way, that was when I died. And I haven't gone back to it since. But I really liked it, and I really loved the visual style of it for the reasons you described. But with some survival games less so, but I find it difficult to judge how long is my food actually going to last. Because you start off with like a full food meter, but there's no way to judge how quickly is this going to decrease. How many turnips per minute do I need to be consuming to stay alive? Should I be eating this turnip or should I be planting it? Because I think I planted 4 turnips or something, and I probably should have just eaten one of them, and I would have been fine. Yeah,
I nearly died to that on my second playthrough, which is also my last one, and I planted all of the turnips and left myself with none, and then I just kind of got lucky on my expeditions and found some turnips lying around. Turnips per minute is a key metric in this.
Yeah. Shall we do questions from questions?
Yes.
Good, because I have them right here. James Thompson writes, Dear CNC Generals, just listening to Pod 124 and the discussion about killing horses in Red Dead Redemption. Can't help but be reminded of the most fun I had in the multiplayer in that game. We would take it in turns to pair up and face off riding donkeys. Armed with just a knife, we would then ride towards each other with the intention of knifing at just the right time to kill the opponent's donkey dead. Watching your opponent ragdoll as their mule crumpled into a heap was deeply satisfying in a way that the quote-unquote normal multiplayer goals never were. Only the multiplayer, of course. RDR's single player was top-notch. Have you ever created similar emergent mini-games which ended up surpassing the titles they took place in? Keep prodding those cats. James Thompson.
I feel like in every game where there's a melee weapon, we've had rounds where we restrict ourselves to the melee weapon. Like knife fights in Counter-Strike, impact hammer fights in Unreal Tournament are great because you build up the impact hammer and it trembles with power, and at that point if it touches someone it will completely annihilate them. And if you both do that at each other, who knows?
I think when we did our games for 2015 Megapod, I talked about the game we invented in GTA 5 about running around the roller coaster naked, but having one person chase a bunch of runners by sitting in the roller coaster cart. Like, I mean, they never really have a job other than laughing, but that was good. I think I find this. When I saw this question, I couldn't really think of an instance in a single player game where I've done this, but I think multiplayer opens it up. Like, there's so many sufficiently open multiplayer games where you come up with.
I think I spent about as much time in Tribes 2 just flying Shrikes, which were the kind of flying jet vehicles towards friends who were flying towards me in their Shrike, and trying to both eject at the same time, jetpack through the air, and then land in each other's Shrike and then fly away. Like what you see on those GIFs on the internet of the people who are much more talented than I am at things.
We used to do that in Battlefield all the time, actually. It's funny that, like, since then, Battlefield, the whole series has been just the sort of default go-to for nutty vehicle stunt videos. But we kind of try to do our own vehicle stunts, not really as impressive as those. Partly because we weren't bazookaing things in midair before we landed back in our own jets. But we would just do things like, can you hover a helicopter underneath this dam and then have the other person go in a dinghy and zoom over the dam and just fly over the helicopter in a boat? Is that a thing you can do? And then we discover, yes. After 17 deaths, yes.
It's one of the big shows about Battlefront, actually, is how its vehicle system has completely removed the potential to do that 100%. Because you get vehicles based on a random power-up, so there's no way of exploring that systemic part of the game whatsoever. Another thing wrong with that game.
I don't normally listen to our podcast because either I'm on it or all my friends are on it, in which case it's just weird because I can't interact with the conversation. But I listened to last week's because Mike Cook was on it, and boiler problems meant that I couldn't come, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I have to say, Marsh's story of shooting his own horse in the back of the head with a shotgun as a kind of handbrake was pretty funny as I was cooking soup at the time.
I remember once we did a...
you learn something new about Marsh every time.
We did there will be listeners who remember this, we did a community Dota game on my stream between my team, the Hot Dukes, and a load of guys from the Crate and Crowbar community, who at the time I think were not starting out in Dota, but like at a point in the curve substantially behind where we were after thousands of hours. And so we made this agreement that we would random all of our heroes. That was one thing. So we'd randomly pick all our characters, so we'd hopefully end up with some kind of comedy draft. That was custom rule 1. But then we randomed and we got like a perfect draft. Like we almost all randomed perfectly within our role, or at least enough that we could adjust around it. So we're like, oh shit. So we came up with this rule that if after, we'll see how it goes, if after 10 minutes it's very one-sided, we will all stop building whatever items we're building and all start building this item called a Dagon, which is, it's some characters do use it genuinely, but it's seen as a bit of a troll item because you invest loads of money to basically just get a laser gun. It's a magic one that shoots a laser, and that's all it just does damage, and it has no utility beyond some stats and stuff. And it's considered the item you get when you want to to ostentatiously kill somebody because you're balling so hard, it doesn't matter what you get the fucking laser thing. And we'll all start building them, because that's potentially a way to throw the game, because you're not buying anything optimal at that point. But we kept winning, and ended up with this disgusting thing where we felt fucking terrible, because both of our attempts to to create fun rules to handicap ourselves to kind of even out the balance. They backfired in the sense that it then looked like incredibly bad manners. And in the situation where we're running around inside their base, lining up like a firing squad, and they'd come running out of their own fountain after we respawned into just a line of like a giant tree man with a laser cannon blowing them away. And I still feel slightly bad about that, but it was funny.
It does sound funny.
Actually, related, not through skill, but through cheating. Craig and I were once given by Valve special cheaty weapons to destroy our community with. We had a community game coming up, and we just said to Valve, like, could you just give us some like random overpowered shit that is not at all fair? And I can't remember what happened in the community game. Our plan was to like surprise them on the final round or something, and as a kind of mess around thing. But I've had the item ever since. So I have a rapid fire rocket launcher that also heals me for 100 health with every hit that it has infinite ammo, never needs reloading. And I once joined a server with Robin Walker on. And Robin Walker is a demo man who is constantly Ubered at all times and has a sword that's on fire and kills everyone hit. So, and we're on opposite teams. So he's running towards me invincible with a flaming sword, and I'm firing infinite rockets at him and throwing myself up into the air, hurting myself but also healing myself rapidly. And everyone is just caught in the crossfire and getting slaughtered. And
as gods fight in a stupid way.
There was a normal player who is just like incredibly good with, I think it was sticky bombs or something, and would just bounce me into the air and keep me like out of the action. Like I was still raining rockets down, but he might even kill me once, or certainly I died somehow. But yeah, that was a fun like mini game taking place, and I have to use it. If you use it in a game with a Valve employee, you're alright, but if you use it in any other game, you just get kicked for cheating as a hacker.
And rightly so.
I like that, CCP employees have all these rules and regulations about what they're allowed to do within Evil Online, whereas Valve are just like, whoa!
I'm on fire and invincible!
That's probably why like Gabe Newell was saying he loves Dota so much. Like, I love Dota, it's the easiest game around.
10,000 hours. Sir Crash writes, Dear Crepe and Croissant Bar, I've noted a preponderance of food assembly and restaurant service related games on phone and tablet, but couldn't think of any food related games for the PC other than that one VR game where you try and do some archaic job for fun when robots have taken over. Can you think of any good PC games that tackle food preparation in an interesting way or as a game mechanic? Happy New Year, Sir Crash. I have an answer, which is Cook Serve Delicious, which I'm pretty sure we've talked about in the podcast before, and it's Brillo. You're running a restaurant. You're quite you're dilapidated. You and the restaurant are dilapidated to begin with, and you have a simple array of meals you can make, and you make them by. It's like typing of the dead, basically. You're pressing keys and holding down keys on your keyboard in order to put ingredients into a thing, hold it in the deep fat fryer for 3 seconds, take them out, put it on another plate, and that sort of stuff. And you're trying to serve customers in a slightly root beer tapper sort of way.
Typing of the bread.
Yeah.
Nice.
Typing of the bread. Yes, that's what.
I was trying to make a pun on typing, which so I didn't get it.
And it's great. As you go on, you unlock new meals. You level up your restaurant, so it becomes from a kind of like snack bar into a fast food place, into a legitimate restaurant, into a high
Looks like how all restaurants actually worked.
McDonald's is still grinding away.
Yeah.
One day.
When it levels up, the world will change completely.
It's really fun. It's really simple. It's nicely presented though, and they're making a sequel now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Cook Serve Delicious 2. Here's a second question though. Well, first of all, Sir Crash, if that is your real name, please write in and tell me what the food assembly and restaurant service related games on phone and tablet are, because I have phones and tablets and like playing games on them and would quite like a food preparation game for that.
I think Nika plays a bunch of games by Kairosoft that are all about kind of managing your empire, and I'm sure there's a restaurant one of those.
They made Game Dev Story, didn't they?
Game Dev Tycoon?
Game Dev... What is one of them?
I think it's Game Dev Tycoon.
I think both those things exist.
Oh, the two things? Oh, well. Huh. They're cool. But he's got a second question, which is also, do you think every attorney is British enough to get a tax break? Or is it more French, and thus should it get an increased tax?
Well, I remember hearing that the art may be returned is not actually made for the game. It's just existing
Copyright-free
oldie-timey
old illustrations.
So I guess it depends where that
etchings.
came from and who made that. Because if they're British, you'd probably be fine.
Well, it is set in Paris, so I should assume that a certain number of those drawings must
Yeah,
be
that's-
of Paris.
Because
it's the background, right? And the birds and suits aren't copyright-free.
Yeah, tricky because like being set in a specific location on Earth that isn't England is the worst thing you can do for British sets. Like, being set in space is fine, but if you're specifically not England, as all locations on Earth are,
Space doesn't necessarily not belong to England.
yeah, exactly. But like birds, birds are real. I've heard, and so I don't know.
Some of them are English.
Yeah, like if you have a totally just a monster that can't even speak, I think you can say, you don't say it's British, but you say it's not non-British, and therefore you get the tax break.
Like space, it's not un-British.
But if there are specifically French birds, birds are real, but if they talk, are they?
What language do they speak? English.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, the actual written language of the game is
English, yeah.
But they're in France. Is it implied that they're actually speaking French and we're just reading it as English? I don't know.
Are they
I don't think
visitors?
there's any symbology to suggest that.
Are they migrant birds?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's tourists, lawyers on holiday.
We don't know.
But really, neither do I ever make those decisions. So.
I hang out in the Crate and Crowbar Discord room, and they were talking about Game Dev Tycoon by Kairosoft recently, and they decided it was unethical because really it's not about the developers or the people who make the games. You act essentially as a publisher. You're looking at what's popular in the market, and you're going, you know what? If we combine sci-fi and RPG, that'll be a huge hit. Let's do that. And you just grind your employees into producing this product to a deadline, and they have no kind of utility.
Yeah, it's great.
James Gurdon writes, here's the quickie. I have much guilt. I'm increasingly playing games wrongly, and it's because I have very little game playing time. I don't feel guilty for having so little time, but I do feel guilty because I find myself more and more often resorting to YouTube playthroughs to get past even the simplest of gameplay blocks. I know none of you would stoop to the depths of looking up solutions online, but what are your guilty game playing habits, James?
I totally look up solutions online.
Yeah. As would I.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I do it for almost every adventure game. I'll look up at least one solution. I think like in the very last podcast I mentioned that I looked up the solution for a Pony Island puzzle. I did it for Metal Gear Solid 5 for the scripted bullshit missions. You just need to look up, okay, what's the best way to get past the scripted bullshit? Yeah, it's actually a great new age for cheaty walkthroughs, because back in the day you had to go on GameFAQs and find a 150 kilobyte text document with admittedly a very good table of contents, and then scan through and read their description of, oh yeah, in Tomb Raider you have to like climb on the second big block, but then jump over the third big block, and then pull lever 2 but not lever 3.
Whereas now you look at a video of someone else doing it.
Yep.
And hooting.
And really, at that point, maybe there's a temptation to just keep watching.
So what we're saying is we feel no guilt.
What do we feel guilty about? Oh yeah, I sometimes just turn the voice off. I wouldn't. If I'm doing that, usually I don't end up feeling guilty about it because the voices piss me off so much. Either by being terrible acting or just being really intrusive at the wrong times. There's a little bit of a dilemma I have with Oxenfree where someone told me to turn the subtitles on, and I didn't because I hate subtitles. I find it really distracting to kind of read something that's also being spoken out loud. My brain keeps switching between the two, and I stop focusing on the actual content. But, so I didn't do it. But then I got to the bit where I know that this is why they told me to have subtitles on. There are certain bits where there's a voice that's just incredibly hard to understand unless you have subtitles on. And sometimes you turn subtitles on and it will just say mumbling because you're not meant to understand it. But sometimes if you have subtitles on, it will tell you exactly what they're saying. And so the trouble is it's such a beautiful art style, and all of the rest of the interface is very kind of in-world. And so your dialogue choices are just 3 speech bubbles above your head, and you just click on the one you want. And when other people are talking, all you see is just a little tiny speech bubble above their head without the text in it, just to indicate that's the person speaking right now, and that works really well. But if you turn subtitles on, they're big, ugly, massive font things down the bottom that are totally conflict with everything else. And even when someone else is talking and they have a speech bubble above their head, the text isn't in the speech bubble, it's down at the bottom, and it's nasty. So I'm playing with no subtitles, and then as soon as the spooky thing comes in, I stop, go into the menus, turn subtitles on, go back in, and then, okay, spooky thing, what are you saying?
I suppose I'm a bit guilty of save scumming. Like, I try and train myself out of it when I really want to do something properly, but like I hit a quest in Dragon's Dogma last night where you have to catch a thief and you can fail, and if you fail, the person who's asked you to help them says, I suppose we'll have to try another night arisen. And I'm not okay with that. I'm like, fuck you, I'm loading a save. Like, even though it's designed that you can try and fail a couple of different nights and go back during the night cycle of the game and try it again, I suppose my guilty thing is trying to get perfect kind of results from things, and sometimes being willing to cheat to get there. But yeah, it's not that bad really, 'cause it's just a game, innit?
Yeah, but goes for all of these things. Except shooting your own horse in Red Dead Redemption.
Carlos Rojo writes, Dear Chris, this is a question for the podcast. I hope you could answer it. Q, death itself challenges you to a Dota match. You get to keep your life only if you win. Which teammates do you choose and which strategy do you use? Happy New Year! Cheers, Carlos Rojo.
So, I mean, it's kind of important to figure out whether or not I die if we lose, or if we all die if we lose. Because if we all die if we lose...
I think it's just you.
He says you get to keep your life before he says which teammates do you choose. So.
Yeah, because like if we were all going to die, I wouldn't bring my friends. Because to some degree, Dota's a lottery, and I don't really want to, like,
bros.
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like I'd just queue solo, like solo matchmaking.
Just whoever.
Yeah, whoever. Then it's Valve's fault. Like, whoever Valve matches me with, it's already Valve's fault half the time, obviously. So, like, why not finish the thing? If it had to be friends, oh man, because it has to be like. I get kind of the point of the question is like, who do you think you could most likely win a game with? But the question is also pretty substantially, who might die?
What if death is a scrub? Why are we assuming that death is any good at Dota 2?
Devil's really good at the fiddle, but death is actually shit.
Oh no, death has. This is like Seventh Seal, right? I thought that death was trying me to play a game, and I had to, you know. Well, in that case, I would probably try and draw on my contacts through esports to play with.
I wouldn't normally ask.
A run of
killed.
I'd find pro players I don't like. Because that probably wouldn't work because they wouldn't have any incentive. If only I die, they don't have any incentive to do well.
Which Dota hero do you think death would be particularly good at, and therefore you would ban?
I mean, there's Necrophos, who's a dude with a scythe who walks around killing people. There's Death Prophet, who is the prophet of death, but her whole deal is she really wants to die and can't, so it doesn't really fit the thing. There's Wraith King, who's the king of the wraiths, but he comes back to life when he dies, so that's not...
Death wouldn't like him.
No. Death's probably Roshan, because Roshan always respawns. He's always there.
He's the like NPC.
Yeah, he grants immortality if you kill him, which I imagine is what would happen if you killed Death. I think that's in the Bible. So hang on. So I mean, the obvious answer is to say that I'd play with, like, Pip or with my team or something, but yeah, fuck it, I would trust my friends. I'd play with my friends, because then I trust them to carry me through a game against death.
Plus, they'd be racked with guilt when you do this.
They're really going to want... If I try and hire a team of ringers, they're not really going to care. But, you know, I think Pip would fight for me.
And you get to go out surrounded by your loved ones.
Yeah, exactly. You fucking idiot!
This team, FFS.
Yeah. Why did we go for the Dagon?
Oh my god, this team! Fuck's sake! I die IRL. Uninstall me. And strategy, was half the question? What strategy would you use?
Strategy. All mid.
Enemy base.
Comfort picks. This is a bit like dying having had your last meal. Destroying my loved ones. The There isn't a best strategy in Dota, but the best advice if you really have to win a game, you're down a game in a best of 3 or something, is ultimately go with what you know. Pick your comfort heroes and don't worry too much about the meta game, unless you're literally going to be killed if you lose. In which case, shit yourself and hope for the best. And Chen's really overpowered at the moment, so pick Chen. But only if you have a friend who can play Chen, which I do, so that's fine.
So I think you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Max Ursa writes, what are your 3 most anticipated games of 2016?
I had an answer to this because I remember thinking about it recently.
Tom thinks in listicles now.
I saw some GIFs and I was like, my god, this has become my most anticipated game. And it's called My Friend Pedro, Blood, Bullets and Bananas. And it's actually a sequel to a game that I think is just called My Friend Pedro. And Pedro is a talking banana who, I think just the tutorial, he just tells you, like, here's how you press jump. And the game is the sequel to is a side-on flash game with ragdoll and sort of like physicsy animation. And you run along and you jump in slow motion and do backflips and shoot things. And the flash game, I played it now and it's pretty good. I think if I played it, 5 years ago or I don't know how old it is. But if I played it a long time ago, I would have been like, wow, it's really cool, look at the cool animation stuff. I think at this point I'm kind of, after playing things like Intrusion 2, physicsy animation is, I love it, but whatever the best physicsy animation game you've played is, that's the only one that matters, and everything else is kind of like, oh yeah, it's so nice. This is going to be the best physics animation game I've ever played. It's very much, what was the Max Payne mod with the Matrix?
Oh,
Kung Fu.
Okay, Max Payne.
Action, no, yeah, Kung Fu, I was thinking about Action Half-Life, but yeah. No.
If you're talking about Max Payne...
Yeah, so it's all about...
Just called Kung Fu.
It's still side-on, but now it's 3D polygonal models, and you can run along and jump and be firing at all times, and the animation system for it is really good. And one of his early GIFs is just showing off, like, if you jump and do a backflip whilst firing, it used to be that your arms just stayed facing the same way and your body just kind of rotated independently, which didn't make any sense. And now he's actually made it so that at the sort of critical juncture where you would need to twist your body in order to keep your arms facing that way, you do twist your body in just the right way. That stuff's really cool. But then he's added a kicking feature, and it's one of those things where when you see it, it's so simple and obvious that you can't believe that you haven't seen it before. But maybe there's some technical wizardry going on and actually it's really difficult to do well. But it's basically just like, it must be just a button that you press, like not the fire button, but a different one. And if you click fire, like your arm's always aiming towards the cursor, so you fire from your arms to the cursor, Bullets come from your guns towards the cursor.
I've played video games.
And then...
I'm sorry, I've only played Gone Home and that very answer.
And then if you press the kick button, then there's kind of like a line from any object that's kind of remotely near your feet going from them towards the cursor. So the first example I gave is like you got a much better experience just watching this GIF from this description. But so there's a frying pan near his feet, and he just presses the kick button and kind of drags a line up from, and the line comes from the frying pan upwards. And then your character does like a kick motion, and I think in this case it does kind of collide with the frying pan, but it's not actually based on that collision. There are other situations where just something's near your feet and you did the kick action, and therefore it gets propelled across. And the amazing thing about it is that, so in that example with the frying pan, he kicks it up into the air, then shoots the frying pan twice, and both of the bullets ricochet off the frying pan and kill 2 people that he can't otherwise shoot directly. Because when a bullet is launched, when a bullet fires, it kind of auto-aims onto the nearest enemy, regardless of where it came from. So even if it ricocheted off something, it will auto-aim. And even if an enemy fires it auto-aims onto other enemies. And then there's another GIF where he just... there aren't many enemies in this, but there's a stack of fuel canisters, and the one by his feet, and he kicks it up into the air, then does a backflip, and because the kick action just depends on where your feet physically are, due to ragdoll physics and everything, while he's upside down, he's able to kick downwards into the fuel barrel that he just kicked up into the air, kick them at the other fuel barrels, and then shoot them twice as he lands so that they all blow up. It's just... it's everything I've ever wanted. And then in the trailer, there's stuff like, diving on someone and kicking them through a window, then jumping onto a zip line and hanging from it by your feet upside down while shooting 2 Uzis at the people you're flying towards. It's just all of my, dorkiest dreams come true.
My actual answer is probably Hitman, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and Deus Ex. Mankind Divided. Because those all seem like potential rad things. But that's not very interesting because they're all AAA big things and everyone's looking forward to them. I'm really looking forward to a game called Diary of a Spaceport Janitor, which has been in development for a year or more, and I've been following the GIFs of it because it was up on itch.io briefly as a thing you could download, but mainly just as some rad looking screenshots and a Twitter account with some rad looking GIFs. And it was just announced on Friday of last week that Tiny Build are publishing it.
Yeah.
And they put out a short trailer and a shit ton more GIFs, and it just looks great. It's a game in which you play a janitor in a spaceport.
I see.
Do you record the events in your life in any way, or?
I don't know, actually. And it doesn't seem, from what I've seen of it, that you're spending a lot of time cleaning things up. You do spend your time doing odd jobs, but the stuff I've seen is all like delivering messages for people and that kind of thing. But you're in this kind of incredibly colourful world, which is 3D, but all the characters, like the aliens that are walking around, are flat sprites, which is the style that I just love increasingly, and it's super colourful, and it has this kind of not Blade Runner, because Blade Runner is mostly the colour black, and this is far more colourful than that, but it has that sort of Asian-inspired sci-fi thing where there's lots of bars with people serving strange-looking foods and lots of huge flat-screen TVs everywhere, flashing colours and adverts and spaceships flying above you and taking off and stuff like that. And it just looks incredible. And it's just made by a very small team and it's just been picked up by a publisher. That, and I'm looking forward to a game called Jalopy, which was previously called Hack, and I talked about in the podcast a year ago, and it's also been in development for just over a year, about 14 months, and it is a game about taking a road trip with your uncle across a procedurally generated landscape inspired by Eastern Europe, for example, the former Yugoslavia, and there's no UI, and all of your actions happen within words. So like, your car will become damaged, it will become dirty, it will need to be filled up with fuel, and so when you pull up to the petrol station, you will physically use a mop and a bucket to wipe your windscreen. When you go inside the petrol station, you will physically pick items up off the shelf. Your money isn't like a number on screen, it's an actual wallet that you take out and pull 3D modelled notes out of it and hand over to a cashier and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of, the world is procedurally generated, it's quite polygonal again, kind of flat textured, but it just looks, in its individual interactions, incredible. And it's also been picked up by a publisher, although I don't think that's been announced yet.
I just thought of another non-AAA thing that is generally one of my most anticipated games, Quadrilateral Cowboy.
Oh yeah!
That's probably, I don't know if that's a release date, but I imagine it's going to be this year.
This is a under the hood glimpse into the making PC game, and this is the first year in the last 3 years that we haven't put Quadrilateral Cowboy in our anticipated game.
Finally,
and we almost did, and then we were like, fool me once. So, fool me twice.
Fool me 2004, 2015.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2014.
Yeah, so it was in 2014, then 2015. And then this is the first year it hasn't been. Not because I'm not looking forward to it, just because it's like, okay now.
Keza from Kotaku was asking on Twitter for like developers who are releasing a game in 2016 to contact her for a list of such games. And right around the same time, Kotaku did a list of, and here's all our most anticipated games of 2015 that didn't come out in 2015. So I submitted heat signature for both anticipated games of 2016 and also here's our games of 2016 that didn't come out in 2016.
I think my choice for this is kind of a cheat because it's a game that I'm going to play tomorrow, but it's Torment Tides of Numenera, which is basically the build is going out to backers this week. I might have something written on it by the time the podcast goes up, actually. So that's both the Torment sequel and a kickstarted RPG by In Exile, which are both reasons I think to be interested in it. But it's also the Numenera game, and Numenera is the pen and paper campaign setting that I ran for a good while before I stopped, and maybe we'll do again at some point. But I'm really excited to see what they do with the game adaptation of that system, because it's such a pen and paper dependent improvisational kind of storytelling thing. And they are sticking to it, which is really interesting. I had somebody today send me a documentation, I think for press playing the game kind of thing, where they explain systems, which was like guide to character creation, which was sort of stepping in like, this is going to come across as a bit weird, but your character's like the sum of 3 descriptors. And I sort of like had this feeling of like, don't worry, I've got this. But yes, I'm super excited about that, because I've just, it's been a while since I've had a setting I really like adapted to a game for the first time. That doesn't really tend to happen very much nowadays. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. And I've seen some new screenshots recently that it's really cool seeing stuff that I took and adapted in one way, presented in the game in a similar way. Like some of the stuff has sort of appeared that could be from the things we've done on pen and paper, which is super cool.
I saw the screenshot that looked as if it had a skiff in it.
Yeah, it's like...
And I saw it before you posted it in the chat room, and then spent a little while Googling, like, Numenera skiff, to try and, like, see, is that's sort of what I imagined the skiff to look like, but is that a skiff?
Yeah, like,
of course, like, it's pen and paper, so, like, you look online and you don't find a lot of images of
well,
what skiffs should look
they're not
like.
also called skiffs in the game, because the technology exists, but it doesn't really have a fixed... this is maybe a conversation for off the pod, but yeah, like I invented that particular implementation of it, and they did implementation in a remarkably similar way, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, just a cool kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah. I hope there's a little Moomin. What was he called?
Thuman.
Called Marston. A Thuman called Thurston.
Marston. John Marston. The Moomin.
That's a weird DLC.
The Moomin.
Philippa War writes, which games get snow/weather right? By right, I mean either emotionally or physically.
I really love the snow in Little Big Adventure 2, where at one point you're walking in the, wait for it, Himalaya Mountains. Not Himalaya. Himalaya. And you pass out and then you wake up and you've been saved by a goddess or whatever, but also you got a snowboard. And now you can go on snowboarding courses. And that's cool in its own right. But also just, actually maybe Little Big Adventure 1 as well. Both of them have a brilliant noise for walking through snow, which is this kind of like, snow gives this weird creak when it's compressed. Kind of like, it's not a, crunch or anything. It's kind of the squeak of snow rubbing against snow. And they do that really well. And, you leave footprints in the snow and it just has this really kind of, I think the scene in Little Big Adventure 2 is just really like, when you wake up, just really quiet and really serene, and you're just miles from anywhere, and all you hear is the squeak of your footsteps.
Dragon Age Inquisition has excellent snow. Nice. Just looks very cold. It's physically. I think it's because Frostbite, and there's a joke here somewhere, is really good at doing ice and snow. Like the Hoth in Battlefront is good snow.
That's good.
That's the only thing I'll say about that game. I like
David Hasselhoff, aka the Hoth.
That's a joke without a home.
What about
punchline without a joke?
The new Tomb Raider? Doesn't that have really good snow wading technology where, like, as you wade through it, it kind of piles
the
up
one
around
that's
your legs?
just about to come out on PC or something.
Yeah. I haven't played it, but...
Yeah, that was the one where at E3 they had that little mini documentary about making her look like she was suffering. This Tomb Raider goes through its weird little face. Yeah. Oh, she hates it this year.
I really like... This is a game I haven't played. I really like the rain in Satellite Rain. Which isn't a game about rain in space. It's rain as in REIGN. But we just spoke about Blade Runner, and it's that kind of cyberpunk, mostly black, future urban city. But it's just got really nice puddles and neon reflected in the puddles, and puddles rippling as raindrops land on it. And Marsh wrote a really nice article about how they did those effects for RPS.
I did actually play that recently. And I liked it up until I got into some proper combat, and then hated the combat system. And it was like, I didn't want to get into the combat, and it's not really about getting into combat, I don't think. But it went so badly wrong that I was like, oh, this is what happens when combat breaks out. I'm not sure if I want to carry on.
It seems like there's a bunch of games last year which just you would have thought people would have cared about more.
Yeah,
and the spiritual successor to Syndicate would have been pretty high on the list.
Real hype from that. I remember, I think Jim's article on RPS was sort of actually nervous with excitement. Like, oh my god, it could be so good. I hope they don't screw it up. And then I literally just didn't hear that it came out for months afterwards. And then someone was just, oh, it's out? That came out?
It wasn't even like the EA Syndicate where people were like, oh, it's out, it's not like Syndicate at all, fucking hate that. It's just, it came out and everyone went, oh. And that was it.
This is what makes me really scared of early access. It's just this kind of
Can I make a guilty confession?
What's that?
I don't know what the fuss is about Syndicate.
Have you played Syndicate?
When I was a kid, this is the thing, my memory of that, it would be disingenuous of me to go, oh god, yeah, golden age of games, I loved Sonic. Because it's genuinely one of those things that I played and I don't remember kind of getting... I remember Cannon Fodder better, I think. And no one's missing Cannon Fodder.
Partly it's stuff that's no longer impressive, so partly it was, oh, this is transgressive, there's ladies pushing prams and you can shoot the ladies pushing prams.
Like DMA era, GTA kind of...
Graham has his hand over his mouth and then away.
But also it wasn't open world in the same way as GTA was, but I think it was earlier than the first GTA games, and you could do things like shoot at a cop car driving past, and the cops would get out and shoot at you, and then you could shoot the cops, and then you could power your entire squad into the cop car, and then you could drive around in this hover police car. So that was pretty cool. But then also just it had really neat combat and mission design and kind of a meta leveling up of your squad in this
kind
world
of XCOM, I guess.
Yeah, in some sense. Kind of XCOM meets Cannon Fodder, I guess.
I remember the Cannon Fodder side. And I think that's because I was a kid and just clicked on things, and then a man with a Gatling gun fired the Gatling gun, and I was like, cool. And then I was distracted by a bee.
Cannon Fodder was rad as well.
Yeah, not gonna...
School rates. What is the best item, if any, you have paid to unlock from a crate? Any games with a pay to get random item feature apply.
Speaking of Cannon Fodder, I think Scoo is your third recruit in that game.
He is, yeah. I think I must have told the story on the podcast before, but short version, spent £220 trying to get a little purple dinosaur from a limited edition Dota crate for Pip. Bought 175 crates.
Jesus Christ.
And didn't get one.
Oh no.
Even though it's got a 1 in 200 drop chance. Then I bought one on the Steam marketplace a week later when they became tradable, because they become tradable after a week. For £20.
Oh my
because, in for a penny, in for the rest of your money. And then, but the consequence of me doing this was tied into the International last year, was that those crates and the items you get in them and a combination of different kind of spend money factors. My only defense is I was doing this for somebody else, and I doubled down on a gift by this point, where the more I spent, the more absurd the gesture became. So in a way I was getting something for the investment, even if it wasn't the thing I was trying to buy. In my defense, but this whole process led to me having an absurdly high level Dota compendium, because your compendium levels up as you kind of complete challenges within the game, but also as you pump money into the TI prize pool. At this point, I contributed about £30 to the prize pool for the International 5. And so this number where the average player would probably have a 1 compendium, 1 to 10, and then maybe some people would pay a little bit extra to get more items, and they'd have 50 to 100. And then by the time the International drew near and this thing had been out for a couple of months, people were getting up to level 100 and stuff, and they're increasing rewards. And I had a level 1,144 compendium. And this entitled me to two things, really. One is something I now own, which is a 1/5 scale replica of the Aegis of Champions, which is the shield that you win if you win the International. So in my room now, I have in this little display case a metal replica of the Aegis, because that was given out to anybody who had an absurd companion. I got an email from Valve, which was like, we're going to send you a metal disc. Where do we send it?
So that was just free?
Yeah, well, In the sense that you
After
spend
you
an
pay
absurd
the
amount of money for it. So that's actually a cool thing to own, right? Like,
Yeah.
very few people actually own them, I think. The other side of this is, at that point, whenever you loaded into a game, at the start of the game, it would ding up. It would, like, everyone's compendium levels would, like, load in with a ding and an icon in ascending order. So it would start with, like, the people who don't have them, and then the level ones, and there's a different icon based on, like, how high level it is, from, like, traditional, like, bronze to gold kind of thing. And the symbol is, like, an increasingly complex orrery, like a little model of a solar system. And they've decided that the level beyond gold and platinum is, like, purple magic. So I would have this thing where inevitably at the end of every fucking match load-in thing, it'd be like, ding 1, ding 5, ding 11, ding 57, ding 95, ding 1144 glowing purple orrery. Look at this twat. And it was humiliating, genuinely humiliating.
Sounds like good value for money.
I wanted to be able to switch it off. Like, I don't mind having the compendium, but please don't make the level public. Because people, like, you get this moment where you load into, like, a solo game, which is a battle for hearts and minds as it is. And you're like, well, I am Dr. Money. And then if you suck, people are like, oh, you spend all this money, but you're still it's like showing up with, like, the expensive shoes to your pub football game, you know?
Stalling your expensive sports car.
Yeah, exactly. But everyone has to reveal their shoes and sports car in ascending order of twat.
Did Pip appreciate the dinosaur?
She did very much, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, she did. She better still use it.
That's all the time for questions that we have.
You can send us questions at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can tweet them at us. We are at Crate and Crowbar on Twitter. You can back us on Patreon, which many people do, and we much appreciate, which is patreon.com/crateandcrowbar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Guess.
You can hang out in our Discord chat room, which we can't say the URL for online because it's just full of gross obscenities and libels, but is on our website and will be probably in the post that comes with this. Is it readable?
What, the URL?
Yeah.
It's just, like, encrypted, isn't it? It's not
Yeah,
like it's
I
libelous.
was joking.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
But
I was
it's
so
not-
deadpan it went past me.
It's not discord.com/crateandcrowbar, right?
No.
I thought it was like, I thought it must be like a URL, like Giphy Cat does URL. Where it's like 3 or 4 whole words, and like, what words did it pick for our Discord room?
It's like, Curious Blue Mammoth is a paedophile.
Well, now we've got to register that domain. .cool. And is that it for the Crate and Crowbar stuff? Then just...
This is the forum,
Oh, yeah,
crateandcrowbar.com
there's also
/forum, which we don't read and you shouldn't post on anymore.
Don't say that. People do. I still check it every day.
Do you?
Yeah.
I thought it was mostly Discord these days.
It is mostly Discord for, like, I think it's replaced the old kind of episode discussion stuff. And maybe it has replaced almost everything else. And maybe we should review that. But if you are using the forum for your own purposes, don't feel discouraged by Graham. He's like that.
I like you.
You can also follow us on Twitter individually. I am at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
I am at Gonas, GONNAS.
I shouldn't have taken a drink just then. And my Twitter handle is at CThursten, CTHURSTEN.